All right, welcome back to the show today, where I'm thrilled to have Dr. Scotta Morton with us. Dr. Morton is not just a former college basketball player, not just a lover of the great outdoors and/or live music, but she's also a distinguished mental performance coach from Columbia, Missouri, which really not from Columbia, Missouri, really from Bozeman, Montana, but currently resides in Columbia, Missouri. At her business, Go For It Coaching, Dr. Morton facilitates profound self discovery, helping clients understand their core identities and the barriers they face and their deepest aspirations within their professional pursuits. With a PhD in sports psychology and under the mentorship of the legendary Dr. Rick Mcguire, whom I've had the pleasure to meet and talk with, and over a decade of experience at the University of Missouri, Dr. Morton brings a wealth of knowledge and insight into achieving peak mental and holistic well-being of the individual. So I appreciate you taking the time to come on and share with us today.
Well, thank you, Coach. I'm honored and humbled to be here, and I think you shared that better than I could. My goodness.
Well, I'm excited. I appreciate, and I value your time and, the fact that you would come on and share with us. And, this will help somebody today because this is a pressing subject. Mental performance, mental fitness in 2025 is huge. And, I think our minds can get us in some scary places and our kids battle it every single day. So, I'm excited to share this to be able to help folks that listen. My first question, like Scotta, I've never in my 53 years on life ever heard of a Scotta. Where did that name come from?
That's a great question. I usually am people's first. I was actually named after my mom's brother, Scott. And he died at an early age from kidney disease. And so that was something that my mom wanted to name me after him. So she painted an A to make it more feminine, and she thought it would be actually pretty easy to pronounce, but I get a lot of Scotas and scooters and Scotias and Scattas. So I stopped going to Starbucks to get my coffee because that was just my lesson learned.
Oh, you know what? That is a first for me, which is cool. I like that. And, that's a great reason why to be named Scotta. Like, I get
That's
that.
right. I'm
Okay.
very honored to have that
Um,
name.
yeah, for sure. All right. Describe your journey from playing basketball at Montana State to pursuing, the work with sports psychology. What was the catalyst, for your desire to
Mm.
jump into that field?
Yeah, great question. So I'll start off like a little bit earlier. So I'm actually from Galton Gateway, which is about 12 miles south of Bozeman. It's a very small town. I went through K through eighth grade with the same 15 kids in my
Wow.
class. And I actually had my mom for homeroom, right, sixth through eighth grade, and she made me call her Mrs. Morton. There wasn't much getting past her. So I grew up with a pretty close, knit community, very tied to the land. And, growing up as a Montana kid, your dream was either to go play for the Grizzlies, University of Montana, or for the Bobcats. And I attended camps at such an early age, and that became this lifelong dream. So got lots of shots up waiting for mom to finish lesson plans, right, and getting there a little bit early. And I was fortunate enough to have that dream come true. And to the point where, sports psychology became a calling, it really was out of that experience. And I share this not from a woe is me. I'm very thankful for the adversity I'd faced, but we had quite a bit of transition during my time. So I had three head coaches in 4 years. Two of them for let go for not such great reasons. So I think our team had a very close bond, but it was also kind of out of survival in spite of not trusting coaching staffs. And then my senior year with the new coach, who's actually still at Montana State today. She's going to be in the championship game here in a couple hours that we have a great relationship with now. But I went from being the leading scorer my junior year to hardly getting off the bench my senior year, in my hometown. And so the amount of, shame that I felt in that moment, because throughout my years, I learned to really outsource my value and worth to playing time, for being the best, for being the stud, to that recognition. And so that was that intersection where it was really had to, hit the pain to understand, geez, who's Scotta Morton outside of the basketball player? So I had a lot of questions, I wanted to answer, like how to have a better relationship with myself, how to create an environment for athletes to thrive. And then that kind of set me down this education path where it ultimately landed me at University of Missouri to study my PhD under Rick Mcguire, the great Rick Mcguire. I always laugh when we say we've had conversations with coach, right? There's usually not much words getting in edgewise, which is great. I was there to soak it all up, right? So a lot of times and hours with him. But John, one thing that was really cool about my experience is that I got, hands-on opportunities working with teams in the athletic department. And to be honest with you, I was not ready for them. I was very naive, I was projected a lot of my experiences as a basketball player. My first team was gymnastics. I was thinking, goodness, they're going to see right through this lanky basketball player. She has no idea what she's talking about. So I was thrown into the fire a couple times, but they were great learning experiences. Obviously, coach retired. He came back a couple of weeks ago, and Brett Halter did a great job celebrating him and the alumni. And he was speechless for once. You can imagine that when they gave him the mic. So then I was at Mizzou for about 12 years serving teams and coaches. And then this past couple years, as much as I loved my experiences, I had my own go for it moment and I decided to start my own business. It's been a nice change of pace and it lends to opportunities such as this and talking to you.
That's fantastic. And Dr. Rick Mcguire is a talker. Like
He is a talker.
he is a talker, and I'm working on being a better listener. So that was a good take me back. Okay, your senior year in college, and you do have some issues, and I mean, a lot of them revolve around our egos that I was this, and now I'm in this role. Did you have any of the tools necessary to handle that? Like, what did you do when you started struggling? Because that's not, like it's very commonplace, right? I mean, kids are going to go through that in Nixon, Missouri this year, right? Like, they're not
Right.
gonna get what they want, and they're not going to be real sure how to handle it. How did you handle it? What did you go to? And I know that's where the desire came to figure it out, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think what made it so challenging, was part of whether it was that generation or what I learned. I mean, I was very armored up. Like I had this idea that, that strength and mental toughness was this thick armor, soldier on, not be emotional, show that you can handle it. So what was happening there is that I was fighting and trying to flee a lot of those hard emotions that I was going through rather than dealing with them head on,
Mm,
right? And so I did get the opportunity. She wasn't a sports psychologist, but she was someone that cared and taught some sports psychology classes at Montana State, to kind of open the door to that a little bit to help not only process those emotions, but also welcome me to be what it means to be human.
mm,
Often when we're in it and we're stuck in the suck, we think, am I the only one that's going through this? And if you keep shame secret, it just amplifies. So um, I was ever starting to think about how I could develop a better relationship with myself so I could update some beliefs that I had that were no longer true. It's part of what I downloaded from the world out there. And that's usually what I get with a lot of athletes that I see today, right? Is those beliefs that we download from either sports society or the culture out there are the ones that ultimately get in the way of us, competing, playing free and being at our best.
What would you tell a kid that's listening right now that is stuck in suck? Like,
Yeah.
what should a kid like that do if they're stuck in suck right now?
Yeah. Well, the first one I would say, you're not alone here. In fact, John, when my ego was at the beginning of my career, I really thought my job in this role was to help kids win, teams win, right? And yes, performing gets me in the door, but this is so much more about humaning,
Mm,
to help them like to not only see themselves in their story, but so they can see themselves in other stories as well, that it's completely normal. And so that means you don't have to over-identify with those emotions.
mm.
This is not a personal failure, right?
No
Yeah.
doubt. And I think one of the problems that, I see, and I had this a little bit probably myself, and I'm sure, you did because you've kind of said that, the longer we play a sport, we get into college and say we play 4 or 5 years in college, our identity becomes much of that. Like
Yes, it
our
does.
identity is as a basketball player. We identify as a football player. And then
That's
when the
right.
clock runs out, like I've watched a bunch of kids that I've coached in the past really struggle in that in between, like trying to figure out,
Sure.
and I mean, I got to be more than a football player because football's over, but that's hard, like
Yeah.
what would you, tell a young kid today that, how to differentiate themselves between this is what I do and this is who I am.
Yeah, great question. I mean, a part of the problem there is actually where we build that based identity, come from the athletes that got good really quick, right? So it's like, man, the idea of playing a sport used to be play. Why
Right.
are you going to have to play football at recess? Why are you playing basketball? To play,
Mm.
just for the intrinsic desire, because it's fun and what I like to do. And then what happens is, oh, John, you're going to be good. You're going to get really good. You're going to go on to do this and this and this. And like, whoa. So unfairly, you start kind of, easily get this validation, and then your identity gets wrapped around that. And then it's like, then it feels a little bit more threatening every time you go out to compete and play because this is an identity that's at stake. So I helped them understand what happened there a little bit. It wasn't maybe an overnight thing. It was just kind of the slowly evolving identity that came around that performance. So the good news is that we can always reclaim that experience back. And I think that's what it is. It's reminding the athlete, hey, this relationship that you have with your sport is yours. It's not about the people about there. It's not about the fans. It's not even really about your parents or your coaches. This is your experience. And so getting them back to those kind of values of when it feels good to be them when they're out there competing and help them kind of support in those committed actions that support those values, that's who they are, right?
Mm.
It's the identity that they can build that's not going to be taken away from them, but regardless of how the performance goes, they're still going to be that same person.
Yeah, the truth is, they're one play from being a human without a sport, right? Like, I mean, we all are,
Mhm.
real life situation. We have a young man that's, a 5-star plus football player. Like, he's the best number one recruit in America. So I have often thought this, like, if I had been the number one recruit in America at the age of 16, you wouldn't have been able to tell me nothing. I mean, everybody in the world is wanting you to come and get your services. How do you, and he has, and his parents have, they're phenomenal and they're
Mhm.
awesome. But how
Mhm.
does a young person, because not all young people, there have been a lot of 5 stars that are worse their senior year than they are their junior year because they start reading the press clippings,
Yeah.
and they become
Yeah.
that person, their identity is wrapped up
Mhm.
in that. Like what would you tell that person, as far as remaining a human being, like being the human being part of it?
Yeah. Well, I also know, John, too, it's like for all of our stories, it takes us to sit in our own pain
Mm,
to decide to change. And I get it. It's like even I remember at Mizzou, like coach would say, Scott, I'm going to make so and so come and talk to you. And I'm sending this person down your hall. And I said, yeah, no, because the athlete has to choose for themselves. They have to take their own ownership. And it's really hard when you're the outside looking in because we can project our own past experiences and know what might be coming around the corner for them. And yet they still have to walk their own path,
mm.
and you can do your best to guide them, whatever, but it does take that. So yeah, this work is available for us all, but we also have to want it. I can't want it more than they do. And I've had to learn that hard lesson. It just does not work. So inevitably, it's when that athlete feels the pain of that performance-based identity where they want to do the work, where the true progress can happen. And
Yeah,
that's
I
hard for a
feel
parent to be watching. It's hard for a coach to be watching.
it's
You can
super
set
hard.
aside a map. Yeah.
It's super hard, but what I love about that answer is that never changes. I'm 53 years old, and until I decide take ownership for my life and my decisions and my choices, you can't really tell me anything. I mean, you really can't,
Right. That's
you
right.
can't make somebody do something, they have to have a desire to do something. I went through and got some coaching early on and I learned this, I call it this the R factor from Brian Kite and Tim Kite. And step number one's pause. So I learned this pause. And so my first question to him is like, how can I teach my wife this? Like my wife needs a pause too. And like he's like, bro, you can't teach your wife that. He said, what you can do is set the example and be the person that she sees the change in. And if she likes it, she may decide to learn something about the pause. And that happened in our life, but it was a valuable learning experience. Like you can't make somebody
No.
do something they don't want to do. You have to, as you
Right.
said, you've got to sit in your pain and then
Yeah.
you've got to make a choice. So, I think that's fantastic. How does a girl from Montana end up at the University of Missouri? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So my athletic director at the time, his name was Peter Fields, and he used to work in the athletic department at Missouri. So he knew Coach.
Okay.
So again, the naive me at that time, Scotta, what do you want to do? Oh, I'm thinking about the sports psychology route. He said, do you know Dr. Rick Mcguire? I should have said yes if I really knew anything. I didn't, right? So planned happenstance, for the small Montana girl, I went up to my first ASP conference, and that's like our Association of Applied Sports Psychology. Worked up the courage to go introduce myself to Coach, at a table in Providence, Rhode Island. So I was so lucky. Obviously, his connection with Peter, where he trusted Peter that maybe he had a GA with potential. And so that was my big move. And yeah, I wasn't a very experienced traveler growing up. Montana was kind of confined to that. So that was ultimately, my biggest probably go for it moment, especially growing up. And I can't imagine if I didn't, because that really stretched me in ways that if I had stayed home, probably would not be possible.
Yeah, associations are huge, like, and sometimes it's being in the right place at the right time.
That's
I've had
right.
the luxury because of Terry Cantwell to, have conversations with Dr. McGuire and phenomenal, right? The power of positive coaching and like he means it, like it's legitimate, and you had him to help you and mentor you. What are a couple of lessons that you have carried with you that go right back to him?
Yeah, I think the idea that the sports psychology goes to and through the coach is so important because John, I had a bias with my experiences coming in that I thought all coaches were jerks, right? And so my mission was to save all these athletes from the coaches. And then the more I got in the trenches with coaches and were able to maybe, humanize them more and get in their trenches and all their roles and responsibilities and the multiple hats they wore, then I was like, wow, I'm missing something here. And then it ended up like later in my career saving all the coaches from the athletes. Right. So I really think the idea of, sport or mental performance going to and through the coach to help them engineer environment, where athletes can meet their potential and bring out their best selves. Because ultimately the kid meets the sport at the coach and not the sports psychologist and not the
Mm.
mental performance coach. So that's been huge for my framing. I think it's not just with athletes. Some of my most rewarding and meaningful work has, been with the coaches that, let me in their space and culture during my time at Mizzou, where I learned tremendous a lot from, because you guys really are some, in many ways, mental performance experts. And my job was kind of to help, support the language and the skills around stuff that they already knew. So, yeah, throughout that, like just opening the door and being curious and the willingness to be the role of the learner, even if you're this PhD experience, it was more of those rich experiences of learning from them, which guided my career.
Well, I'll tell you something I think about sometimes, and you might agree, you might not, but because you came in with a bias, towards the coach and this and that, but I have an opinion that I think coaching can be a very lonely business. There
Hmm.
aren't a whole lot of people that truly understand what it means to be graded by a scoreboard every time you walk out on the
Right.
field.
That's
Like you
right.
can be an English teacher, you can be a banker, you can be a lot of things. And you don't have a jumbotron sitting at the end of the field, to grade your performance every single time in front
Right.
of thousands of people. Like what would you say about that? Like the process of figuring out like, this coaching thing is a little bit can be a little bit lonely too, and they
Mhm.
need help
They do.
as much as the kids do.
Yeah. I mean, it makes me think, John, about the favorite quote that I love to share with athletes and coaches about being the man in the arena. I'm sure you've heard of that with Teddy Roosevelt, right?
No doubt.
And going back, why it's different to coach and play today than it was, when I played from '03 to '07 or when you played or coached early on. That when I had a bad game, and of course I had quite a few, I didn't have to read them about my bad games and tell the newspaper the next day. I mean, I remember my dad hurry up getting his farm truck going down to see what they're saying about Scotta Morton, right? And now it's different. And when I ask athlete, when do you get critique now? Or coaches, when can you get critique? It's in real time. It's happening as you're coaching, as you're playing, competing. So there's going to be greater temptation to play it safe.
Mm.
So I always, kind of argue back when there's the, don't you think kids are so entitled these days and just lack this mental toughness? Or I said, no, it's the most mentally tough generation because it's going to take more courage to be in the arena more than ever.
Mm,
It's
I
going to
love
be easier temptation to play it safe and give into what? The fear of other people's opinions. That's Michael Gervais. He coined the FOPO idea. And for coaches too, right?
Oh, is real.
FOPO is very real. So that's what we talk about. It's like, okay, one, who are the opinions that really matter? Because there's been plenty of cheap seat feedback from people that have never once dared greatly with their lives. Because if they did, they wouldn't be capable of it. Who's the feedback that really matters? It's coming from the other people in the arena, right? So FOPO is present for each one of us, but we can learn to kind of dial it down and not let it be in our driver's seat as a coach or as an athlete. Yeah. So sometimes those conversations can be really powerful at the beginning of the season, just naming it for what it is. It is there and it is a thing. And sometimes we entertain it and we will because we're human.
You know what? If I'm 53 and if I see a negative comment about I suck, it bothers me. Like I mean, I know how
Sure.
to let it go. I know how, but it just does. Okay. So let's go down this rabbit hole.
Yeah.
High school kids today, there's
Hmm.
more crap because of social media. Now, we are as we call ourselves being as connected as ever through these, devices of mass distraction, right? But we
Yeah.
are we are the less connected as a society as we've ever been from
Mhm.
human beings. You know what I'm saying? But because of cell phones, we think we are. Now, social media, you got burner phones, you got fake accounts, you got all this stuff going on. So when you go out there and play a game now, you can be attacked immediately. Like
Hmm.
how does a young man that, is a quarterback or he's a point guard or he's somebody that people would want to attack, what would you advise that kid in how to handle the social media, how to, not let it, get inside your own head because man, the amount of fake phones, fake burner accounts, fake
Hmm.
things going on, like it's almost comedy to me, but it's real, for these people. Like, what would you tell the
Yeah.
young
Yeah.
kids about that?
But I mean, if they're really willing and serious about it, and I mean, some of the high profile athletes I worked with at Mizzou, it's turning off the mentions. And I get it. That's really hard because you also love the good stuff of it, right? The validation where things going well. But we really get clear and have those hard conversations about, what is this value and worth really measured and who really matters. And so I get it, it is there, but is that gonna help support you in your goals that you have for yourself and this team moving forward? So there is the turning it off is the one, and then the other is keeping your circle small.
Yeah,
Not the people that are just always going to tell you want to hear, right? But it's the people who recognize the value behind being the quarterback, behind being the stud pitcher that know you for you, and all of those identities that make up who that individual is.
yeah.
And
Well,
it's challenging. You're talking about like that's where we feel the number one I have issue that comes in is the feeling of performance anxiety. And the anxiety is coming from the FOPO and then this idea of the spotlight effect, right? Where it's like this idea that there's a spotlight shining down on Scotta Morton. And that means that everybody's evaluating, measured me, and then what's interesting about the spotlight is everybody else has their own spotlight. So nobody's really thinking about you as much as that you think you are.
mm, that's
Yeah.
fantastic. And I think, I guess I have this thought when you said that was you really can't have your cake and eat it too. Like if you're gonna live off of the mentions and the
That's
pats on
right.
the back, then you're gonna get the other two because they're just out there. Like
They are.
it is what it is, and
Mhm.
I've known several college quarterbacks that, Gardner Minshew was with the Raiders last year, and I know, in college and in professional football, when football season got close, the phone went off. Well, the
Mm.
social media went off, just did away with it because there's no way you can
Mhm.
make all those people happy. I mean,
Mhm.
Will Rogers was the quarterback at Washington this year. When
Yeah.
all camp starts, it just goes off because
Yeah.
you can't add that many negative thoughts to your head. And I don't care who you are. You could be a
Right.
Division I head football coach that, goes out there and goes 5 and 6, when they come after you, they're gonna get to you. Like if it's
That's
on, they're
right.
gonna get to you. And if they can't get to you, as I had a one share with me this year, they got to his kids, because of who he
Mhm.
was. And, like I think, you know, one of the answers is, cut the mentions off, right? Like I get
That's
that.
right.
You can't,
Yeah.
you're gonna get the bad things, and or is it possible? Is it even possible to dismiss all of the bad as just they're idiots? Is it even possible, or is it gonna bother you no matter what?
I mean, I think first thing, like to be willing to be aware of and acknowledging it is important. And I do think it's possible to change your relationship with the feedback.
Yeah,
But if that's something that you're making yourself accessible to 24/7, it is going to be a little bit more challenging. Because to your point, like the best word that I can think about sometimes with athletics or college athletics is that world when you're in it can become intoxicating.
yes,
Your ego does get drunk. And,
no,
and your ability to remain sober, if you will, through it all is your competitive edge.
yeah,
Yeah, and that's for everybody with those boundaries. So you have to have some boundaries, or it's very quickly to lose yourself, right?
no
And,
doubt.
and not only lose yourself, but also lose the greatest gifts that you have to give because you're attending to too much other stuff that still hijacks your attention. And now no longer are you, either coaching or playing through something that feels soulful anymore. So you
Mm,
limit your impact as well.
wow, that is
Yeah.
that
And
is
it is challenging and it is hard and it's easier said than done. And that's why I tell her, like, I get it. You're not alone in this.
No, that's right. And it's hard for me. I've caught it from the coaching end of it, right? So I've seen the
Sure.
comments when we went for two and didn't win the game, and when they called into the radio station and said you should fire Coach Perry because he's
Yeah.
lost his crap. Like I can't unhear it, right? Like it's been heard, and I can, roll it off as idiots, but it does still hurt. So I don't
Yeah.
have the experience of being a high school kid and catching that crap because nobody wrote about me in high school, like that
Yeah,
wasn't
that's right.
a
That's
problem,
right.
So I do,
To
that is,
your point, John, it's like the why we care sometimes we are social animals. We all have a need to belong, right? It's just when does that caring about other people think turn more maladaptive?
mm,
Because of course there's like, does this mean to stop caring what people think? Well, no. I mean that because we are social animals, we do care. We want to, elevate our teammate value or coach value because that's where our longing is usually in our careers. Like that's the true sense of belonging that we're after. But we're told that to get that belonging, we have to go be the best. We have to be superior to everybody else. Chase the I'll be happy when. And that's the trap.
yeah,
So if you can give like, and I'm sure you've had those moments with your team, like the really intimate moments where the phones are off and you're in the hard stuff with each other. And that is it, right? That is the space that you want to get athletes going, oh no, this is what you're chasing,
yeah,
not that.
mm,
And there's a different type of vulnerability and intimacy that comes with it. But that's also, I think, in my opinion, that's what makes sports great. That shared experience.
no doubt about it. And you said something else, when you said keep your circle small, there's
Hmm.
a lot of truth in that. And, I would go a step further and probably say, like, your circle is small already. Like, you may think you have a large circle, but let some adversity hit, and you will
Yeah,
find out
right.
real fast how small your circle is.
That's right.
Like, now, when everything's great, I tell people all the time, like, we've been pretty successful here over the last 5 years, and I got lots of friends. Okay.
Hmm.
But let us go 2-8 and see how many friends I got. Like, and I know that because I've been 4-7
Yeah.
before. I've seen them jump ship. You know what I mean? Like, I get it. I do have a small circle. And I think
Yeah.
even as a kid, as a young person, if you understand that, that this group here, they got me no matter what. That's your group. You know what I mean? Like, you
Mhm. That's
really
right.
don't have hundreds and hundreds of, in your group. Like that's not really a fact. Let me ask you this in
Yeah.
college athletics, because you probably caught some of this.
Hmm.
I think college athletics has made a turn, and I don't know if it's for the better or for the worse, but I think for the mental health of kids, for young people, I do believe it's been for the worse. because of the NIL and all of that stuff that's going on right now, has that
Yeah.
made mental health, mental fitness easier or harder?
Really great question. I would say, John, it's just very different. Like, for example, so I still contract with Mizzou and athletes come to me now, which is kind of nice because if you're going to get in your car and drive to Scotta's office, you want it, right? So
Yeah.
we can have some really rich discussions. But like in comparison, I can have an athlete from an Olympic sport, and the elephant in the room is that the roster cuts because of revenue share, like, pretty significant roster cuts to having, a higher revenue athlete sport come in and the issues and problems that athlete's having quite different than what they're making in NIL comparatively. I mean, they're just two different experiences, but you can't blame them for each one. It's just all relative to what they know. So I think it's becoming more polarized at other end about, I feel like when I worked at Mizzou, there was more sense of community, athletes supporting each other, right? Where it felt like we could really get around this concept of out teaming. And not to say that that's still not possible. Um, but yeah, it's my athletes that I have coming in that might be struggling from an Olympic sport. The struggles look different than someone coming in who's already been promised a lot of money and already expects to play, and then realizes, oh, this doesn't mean I still play right away as a freshman. What?
Hmm.
And have to work back from that. Um, I still think that the same themes come up and where we go together as far as identity, but the landscape looks different for sure.
Well, one of the thoughts, just a very simplistic thought, is I've often heard, in marriages, one of the biggest fights early on and really throughout, one of the leading causes for divorce is money. They fight over
Mm-hmm.
money, money, money. Well, now with these 19, 18, 19, 20, 20, we've added money to the equation. So if money can allow grown-ups to get a divorce, what can it do to these young people that do
Yeah,
not
good point.
have,
That's right.
the skills to necessarily acquire it, but the physical tools to be worthy of it? Like it's hard for me to
Right.
believe that that hasn't been an added issue for young people's mindsets.
For sure. Absolutely. And for coaches too. I mean, it's really hard to promote and nurture a team as well, right?
That's a
Because
whole
it's
nother
part of
issue.
the comparison game, right? And looking
Yeah.
out for number one. And that's the beauty of team. I mean, the ironic thing about that is like the surrendering to the team is actually what makes you individually perform better. But if you're constantly thinking about yourself and evaluating yourself, that's what actually hijacks you from performing your best. So your performance actually doesn't even get better if
Mm,
you're constantly thinking about yourself and how you're doing.
no doubt about it. I mean,
That hurts.
there are lots of books out there about, being in a flow state. When you're in a
Bingo.
flow state, like you're not even thinking, you're just doing, like your thoughts are not blowing you up. I got a question about thoughts. And this is a
Mhm.
strange question, okay? And I'm sorry for asking it. What is a thought?
Mm.
I think that's a complicated answer.
Well, I guess this is the way I'll answer this, John, because I think in the evolution of like sports psychology, I'm sure you were told just as I was as an athlete, John, control your thoughts. You got a bad thought, just replace it with a positive thought. Okay, this is mental toughness. So here I'm out playing basketball thinking, okay, I suck. But let me just replace this with a positive thought. I got this. You're awesome. You're great. It's gonna be tonight's the night. Like all these kind of fluffy positive affirmations, as you will. I was feeding myself these positive thoughts, John, but I didn't really believe it. I didn't believe the self-talk that I was trying to feed myself. So when I ask people, like, how's it going for you? Controlling everything on your mind. Everybody smiles. Why? Because it's impossible. It's impossible to control what's coming in and out. Thoughts, memories, ideas about yourself, right? So it's not about controlling them. In this work, it's about changing your relationship to your thoughts, meaning you don't have to actually buy in or entertain everything that you think.
Mm,
Thoughts are just thoughts. And that feels kind of trippy the first time you hear it. So, like, well, who am I if I'm not my thoughts? You're the one who sees the thought. And that is a thought that is probably not even your thought. It's probably a culture's thought. It's probably a thought you've downloaded. Maybe it's a belief system, that that was ingrained into you even at an early age throughout sport that you're still clinging to, right? We talk about this performance identity. So when we talk with athletes, because they are so connected with their phones, I say you do software updates for your phone, don't you? Mm-hmm. You actually have to do software updates too for those beliefs in your head.
Wow.
And you can't update them if you don't see them for what they are, as just thoughts.
Mm,
Mm-hmm.
very good. Very good. Well, we are not our thoughts, right? Like I get that. Like,
Yeah.
and it's a good thing because I get some crazy thoughts, right? And I know
Right.
they're not
Yeah.
me. So and I do try really hard to flip them. I mean, I've worked at that and I think
Sure.
I'm
Sure.
better at it. How do you turn, like you said, you can have all the affirmations in the world, but if you
Mhm.
don't believe it, it don't matter. How do we make how do we push ourselves over in the belief category? How do I
Yeah.
become a person who believes I am worthy, or I am,
Mhm.
this or that? Like where does how does belief kick in?
I think, that's where like the confidence conversation comes up, and I really got this from Michael Gervais, a performance psychologist, but comes from what you say to yourself.
Hmm.
You've got to believe it. And the only way to believe it is to earn your self-talk. And the only way we earn self-talk is by going through really hard things. From coming into for being the man or woman in the arena that's getting stretched, that sometimes comes up short and sometimes, comes up and win, like being in the mast. So part of that self-talk to help let go of those other narratives go comes from that credibility. Like, okay, there's a doubt. I'm aware that doubt's on my mind. I'm aware that nervous is there. I'm worried about what's going to happen. I see ya. Thanks for showing up. You tend to show up fear and anxiety right when this game starts ready to go.
Hmm.
Hey, I see ya. But you know what? I've done the work. I'm prepared. So it's more self-talk that's not necessarily in this positive affirmations. It's grounded in truth, either from your preparation or even what you stand for. Like going back to the values of what feels good to be, to coach in a way that feels good to you, or a player that feels like the way to compete in a way that feels good to them. Is it staying courageous? Is it being aggressive? Is it committing? Right? Is it staying resilient? So it's having kind of conviction in how you want to experience yourself that you've already kind of set your mind to. So you have to battle the doubt to help you let go of the normal part of the story that's going to be there,
Hmm. I love that.
like it is for every single one of us. So it's more of like a switching of attention. But we first have to debunk the belief altogether, right? And that's where the mental performance comes to work. Like, what am I believing about myself? And is that even really freaking true? And where did that come from?
Yeah.
Yeah. And when
One,
am I especially triggered? When do
right.
I really want to blend with it?
One word that I added to my affirmations because, like you can say, I'm the greatest coach in the state of Missouri. You can say it over and over and over, but like, like what I have added was the word becoming.
Mm,
I am becoming the best version of me. I can be in the process of, and I can
mhm.
go with that. Like I can believe that. I can buy into that. Like, I'm all in with becoming the best
Yes, I
version
like
of
that.
myself. Let me ask you, and that was a great answer. What about like the state of, let's say college athletics right now? Is there w mental fitness training, mental performance training? Is it is the majority of college athletes getting mentally trained as much as they're getting physically trained? Is there, like where does that sit on the big scheme right now as far as,
Yeah, I
teaching?
mean, it's come such a long way, even since when I first started. I would say, the schools with the, bigger budgets can actually afford having an in-house mental performance coach, right, with those Power Five. Not everybody has one, but usually there's at least a resource. I know when I worked there, we had three integrated psychologists along with three mental performance coaches, kind of a holistic team. I think where we're kind of trending now, talking about where, with the revenue share and where money is going for NIL, I think it's getting harder and harder for people to stay within college athletics in a student support role. with the hours and with the demands and, probably not seeing the pay increases that they would like. So I think that landscape has changed. That wasn't the reason why I left, but a lot of folks like me now are also kind of doing independent contractors as well, just to kind of catch up with the changing landscape. Now athletes can hire their own, right? They don't necessarily have to go uh, through
Valid
this
point.
support program. So, but yeah, comparatively to where we were 10 years ago, it's definitely kind of part of that holistic wheel with nutrition, strength and conditioning. It just becomes another piece of the puzzle.
I'm 100% sure we've talked about this already, but I want to ask, what are one or two common mental challenges that athletes run into, that you see? What's one or two of the top?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that FOPO when it moves in the driver's seat and the suffering that comes along with it.
Mm,
So how do we kick that FOPO out? That's where the performance anxiety, I mean, that really is the main theme. And burnout.
mm,
And that quickly kind of relates to the FOPO. But I get a lot of athletes earlier now that just have no love anymore. They're exhausted with the sheer amount of time they've invested in the sport or their parents have invested in the sport.
mm.
That seems to be getting at a younger age now more than ever, which is also sad.
Yeah, very sad. And that's with the advent of all the travel squads and seven, like all that has added to the burnout, I am sure. We still are blessed. We have a lot of kids that move from one sport to the next. And they just enjoy playing it and they get to play all of them, which is great. You know what I mean? Because there's going to
Mhm.
come a day when, they're not going to be able to play them all and, it'll get more serious, but we do like for them to play a lot of things. Let's fast forward to what was the thought behind, starting your own business, the go for it coaching? Like, what was your thought behind that when you
Yeah.
decided to, and how was that scary? The thought, I'm going to give this up. I know what I'm
Yeah.
making right here, and I'm going to go into this world, that is
Yeah.
very different. You do not know what you're going to make, I guess, monthly or yearly or
That's
whatever.
right. That's
Was that
right.
scary, and what was
So
that?
kind of catching me in it here. And I was laughing. I was talking to a coach yesterday, and he bought a Fiji water bottle, and it made me think about. I think I had my midlife crisis much earlier, like around 34, and at that time, I had applied for the Peace Corps and got accepted to go to Fiji. And to be honest with you, John, at that point, I was running away from hard. If you were to ask me, does it take more courage to stay within college athletics or leave? The right answer is words to stay. So I'm
Mm,
glad I didn't do that. 2 years ago, it was different. 2 years ago, it would take more courage to get out than stay in. And really, I was so grateful for my career. I loved it. But I also was longing, for maybe a little bit more deeper connection with my work, getting out of the system, diversifying my clientele, I mean, it's really hard to beat my own schedule. I mean, that's the best perk that comes out of it. And yet, yeah, it was scary. And I didn't really know until what I knew. Like when you lose the insurance benefits and the free swag and then all the business and technical and social media, all that stuff was way beyond me.
mm.
But it was a challenge that I also knew I needed, to kind of get back for this work feeling soulful in a way that was a relationship that I really wanted to have with it.
What would you advise someone else that's sitting in a job right now, where they're, making a decent salary, but they
Mhm.
have this desire to step out and do something, a little
Yeah,
different. Like
yeah.
what would you advise that person to do? When do you know
Mhm.
to take the leap?
Yeah. Well, I forgot who said this, but I think the answer was that most of our suffering exists between the knowing and the doing.
Mm,
And so I would say go towards your longing. You're never wrong. And if your fear and longing do conflict, still choose your longing.
mm. Wow.
Sometimes it doesn't have to look like a complete rip off the band-aid and go. It's other ways that you can create space in whatever that you're doing, like a podcast or whatever, to see if this is something that you incorporate into your daily life, if that is something that you fully want to commit to. But yeah, I mean, just the go for it.
Sure. Well, hence the go for it coaching, right?
That's
Like that's
right. There you go.
a
Yeah.
good lead way into that. I had a Sahil Bloom, who is a guy I follow on social media. I asked him
Oh,
that
yeah.
because he went from the financial world to the writing newsletter world, and I asked him like, "How do you know when to?" And I thought his
Mhm.
answer was pretty good. He said, "When there's evidence that I can make it. You know, when there is evidence that, I can do this and make a living. It may not be the same living or it may, but
Sure. Sure.
not just cold turkey, but there's a little bit of, and you had a little bit of evidence. There's no doubt in my mind. You had enough,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the mental performance world to do that. When you jump out and you go for it, right? We'll keep using those terms so people can understand. Go for it. Let's see. The website is go for it mpc.com. MPC stands for,
Mental performance coaching.
I was going to guess that, but I just didn't want to be stupid on my own podcast. You know what I'm saying? Um, and I have pulled it up. The website's great. When you step out on your own and you decide to start go for it coaching, what's one or two of the biggest challenges you've had personally as far as, rolling into the business side of that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think just the logistical stuff was huge. I mean, I have Business Book for Dummies right in my bookcase over there, right? So that was completely out of my wheelhouse. Learning how to use my time, as far as whether it was with branding and how much space I actually time I wanted to devote for clients, this other time toward my continuous development to kind of find that flow. I think that was probably the biggest challenge. And then also remembering why I'm here. So there's still that high achiever part of me that can get sucked into this job where it's just like more clients is better. It's going, whoa, let's get back to why you're here. So it's making sure like my managing part, my own protector part is not in my driving seat that still wants like to demand perfectionism or still wants to please other people. And being aware of that so that I can still, stay connected to what is the ultimate reason why I'm doing this. And this is the humaning part.
Mm. So, are you happy?
I am happy.
Well, that's fantastic because that matters. That matters more than anything else in this world.
Most days, for sure.
Yeah, no, nobody's happy 100% of the time. That's a
No.
physical impossibility because of all them thoughts that come out of nowhere sometimes. Okay,
Yeah.
in the mental performance world, what are some, if somebody was listening and they're not in the mental performance world, but they would like to, they would like to get into it. What's some things they can do? Like, what are some resources that you would send them to start trying to figure it out?
Sure. Yeah, I always send everybody to the ASP website, especially my students that are interested in graduate school. They have a great resources for students. And then my other, big thing is, again, this would be the naive Scotta, starting out thinking that I wanted a career in sports psychology so I could work with maybe professional sports or NBA. I like the idea of it. That seemed really sexy. Versus behind that was more of this still feeling that I had something to prove to the world, right? So I always go back to, and one of the great advice I got is just do a great job where you're at.
Mm, mm,
If that's shaking balls on the volleyball court before coach asks you a question, great. If that's being the water guy or girl at football practice at John Perry's practice to show that you're invested, that maybe he'll come over and, great, do a good job where you're at. And that's where that referral process starts, lead with two intentions, good intentions, serve, and keep that ego at bay.
that's fantastic. Have you heard of Josh Metcalf?
I have.
Okay, well, I interviewed Josh Metcalf, and his episode comes out tomorrow. And one of the things I loved about him was, he's a little bit different fella, okay? But, like he drops out of, his graduate program and he goes and, like goes homeless, and then he goes and lives in a closet in a church, and he's got three little boys that he's training. And the whole time he's training them, he's thinking, man, why am I doing this? Like, I should be training Michael Jordan. I should be training Kobe Bryant. But he said the good Lord kind of shook him and said, dude, until you be the
Hmm.
best you can be with them three, you ain't getting nobody else. You know what I'm
There you
saying?
go. Yeah,
So
that's it.
it changed his life when that you
Mhm.
got to be present. Like, you got to be the
You
best
do.
you can be
You
where you're,
do.
no
That's
doubt.
right. That's right.
But social media and the world today with technology makes that hard to do, because
Mhm.
what I mean, what do you see on social media? I mean, you see the mental performance coach that is training Michael Jordan, or
Yeah.
and that's the big shiny boat, but that's not, like you got to be great where you are, and that's hard to do sometimes.
You're exactly right.
Well, tell me this. I've eaten up a lot of your time, and I'm super grateful. I've
This is
thoroughly
great.
enjoyed it. If somebody wanted to dive in deeper with you, tell me how they locate you.
Yeah, if they go right to that website, and I have a submit an inquiry page, and that usually comes through, yeah, my Google email pretty fast, so we can connect it that way. Speaking of social media, I'm at Go For It NPC on Instagram, and so I have some of my stuff there if people want to follow along there. Yeah, and it's just not athletes, it's coaches. I'm also doing some executive coaching as well. Again, this all goes back to humaning, right? And
Yeah.
developing a better relationship with ourselves, and it's available to us all.
Yeah, I've learned
Still,
very
I'm still
quickly
learning as I'm going
that
myself.
it's not just sports related. Like
No, it's not.
every human in the world could use, and I think you started off with this. We update our phones, but how often do we update our what? Our
Yeah,
thinking,
our
our thoughts?
software in our heads. Yeah, our beliefs. That's right.
I mean, it's crazy. Like we will not do it and expect to get different results, which is, asinine. We'll update that phone in a
Right.
heartbeat though. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, yeah.
we're not gonna miss one of those. So I will put all of that in the show notes. I'll
Thanks.
put all the website, the Instagram, where they can locate you, and try to send people that way. I'm super grateful. I'm super thankful that you've come on today, and I hope everybody that listens takes great joy in this. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. This was fun.
And thank you for everybody that listens to the show, man. I'm super grateful. Until next time, adios, amigos.